So the importance of these patterns, the main reason that we're doing them is to make our writing and our speaking a lot more varied and stylistically pleasing. Style is the way in which you write. You guys have all been learning the mechanics of writing, the basic foundation, but you're going to develop your own voice in writing over time. Some of you already have a pretty decent voice, and it's going to take time to really develop your style. Some writers spend most of their lives developing it. Others develop it early on, and then they change it throughout time. Okay, so you could have different authors with different stages in their life in terms of their writing. So let's focus on, in chapter 1, so compound constructions. Chapter 1, we covered the simplest kind of sentences. We can expand these basic patterns by joining two simple sentences to make a compound sentence. So the first pattern that we have is a compound sentence with a semicolon and no conjunction. Okay, so this is important because we cannot, well, let's look at the pattern first and I'll explain why this is important. So subject verb, semicolon, subject verb. You have to have these two sentences. If you see the first sentence that she wrote there, this pattern helps you join two short, simple sentences having two closely related ideas. Okay, so let me give you a sentence. Okay, let's use some names. Zaid. Now, if you've ever studied Arabic grammar, you know that Zaid and Amr are the two examples. Zaid hit Amr. Amr cried. Two closely related sentences, right? It's because Zaid hit Amr that Amr is crying. That's why I put a semicolon. Okay, it's the implication there is that these are related, right? Closely related. So Zaid hit Amr, Amr cried. Now, here we have the subject, Zaid, right? The verb, hit, and then we have Amr, another subject, and then the verb, cried. So hit and cried. So we have subject, verb, subject, verb. And then we put, very important, we put the semicolon in between. Now, if we did something like this, and this is a mistake, a lot of people make this mistake. I make the mistake sometimes. Zaid hit Amr, comma, Amr cried. This is a misuse of the comma. This is called a comma splice. This is a error, okay? Never do it. Never put a comma in between two independent clauses. It's called a comma splice. What you have to do to fix it is to put the semicolon or use another pattern like you put a comma and, for instance. Okay, but semicolon is what we're working with here with this one. So another example, the train came by and Jack was excited. He's excited because the train came by, right? Or because someone's in the train that's coming to him, right? We have to know from context. But these are closely related. The train came by. Jack was excited. Could also change it. The train came by. It screeched to a halt. So these are still closely related. Okay. I could also say the phone rang. The phone rang. The clock buzzed. Now, these would be closely related if you're writing kind of a scene in a story, right? The phone was ringing, the clock buzzed, the ticking of the other clock, something like that, right? You just keep going and giving all of these things that are occurring at the same time. So sometimes authors will use the semicolons to show things happening at the same time. Okay, so it's very simple. Subject, verb, and a semicolon in between. Okay, the pattern is right up here. Okay, so when you do your 5 sample sentences, you have the pattern right here. Now, when to use this? So she and he are going to give us some explanation. So this pattern helps you join 2 short, simple sentences having 2 closely related ideas. The ideas have to be related in some way. They need a semicolon instead of a conjunction and comma. Okay, so the illustration in the box and the examples show only 2 clauses. You can actually have 3 or more. Be sure to avoid pitfalls of the compound sentence. So you can have, for instance, the train approached. It stopped. It screeched. It stopped. Okay, so you can do something like that. It's multiple compound, independent clauses. Now, these are all related. We're talking about a single kind of event taking place. The train approaching, it's screeching to a halt, and then it finally stops. So they're very closely related. There are ways of, you can change, you could add coordinating conjunctions and whatnot, but just practice with these first. So be sure to avoid 2 pitfalls of the compound sentence. The fused or run-on sentence, which has no punctuation between the 2 sentences that have been joined. So this is a run-on sentence. I texted him yesterday. He didn't answer. The problem here is that you have 2 independent clauses. I texted him yesterday. We have a subject and a verb, stands alone. He didn't answer is the second one, and there's no punctuation between the 2. So that's a run-on sentence. It means the sentence kept going when it shouldn't have. It should have had a punctuation, a semicolon, or a period. And then the dreaded comma splice. The comma splice, using a comma instead of a period, semicolon, or colon to separate the 2 sentences you joined. So these are the 3 ways of getting out of the comma splice: a period, a semicolon, or a colon to separate the 2 sentences you have joined. So let's look. The ogre snarled. Independent clause number 1. Jean screamed, or Jean screamed. So there's a comma in between. That's the error. You can't do that. You have to fix it with a period, a semicolon, or a colon. Okay, really try to memorize that rule. Okay, so that is pattern number 1. Let's see. You avoid the above 2 problems if you faithfully copy the following patterns for compound sentences, being careful to imitate the punctuation exactly. So subject verb, semicolon, subject verb. Remember that an independent clause is subject verb combination that makes a full statement. What precedes and what follows the semicolon must be capable of standing alone. Otherwise, it is only a fragment. Okay, so this is another, we have run-on sentence, we have comma splice, and we have fragment. At the game, the reason for the loss in yardage being the broken shoestring on the left guard's shoe. Being is the wrong verb form. Change it to was, and the phrase becomes a complete thought and a sentence. Okay, so using the wrong verb form there makes it a fragment. Which was the only book that he couldn't find for his report. So what is this? Which was the only book. This whole thing, which you're going to learn shortly, is an adjective clause. Which was the only book that he could find for his report. Okay, this is actually, it's 2 adjective clauses. Which was the only book, first one, that he could find for his report, second one, put together. But it's not a complete thought because it's a dependent clause. It doesn't have an independent clause, and so it's a fragment. This fragment is a dependent clause, even though it has the subject-verb combinations, which and he could give. It is not a complete sentence because it begins with the subordinating word which. change which to it, and you now have a complete thought. Okay, so it was the only book that he could find for his report. Okay, subordinating words such as the following keep a clause from being independent. Okay, because, if, when, after, other such subordinating words. Okay, we have subordinating conjunctions, right? And then we have relative pronouns. So subordinating conjunctions are for adverb clauses, and relative pronouns, that, which, who, etc., are for adjective clauses. Plus a subject-verb combination equals a fragment every time. These are some common semicolon errors. Because so many of us work 24/7. So this is an error because we have a dependent clause first. There's no independent clause. We need an independent clause to have the semicolon, right? So this is a dependent clause. The dance having started at 8:30, right? So again, we're expecting something else there. For example, that should have a comma. The dance having started at 8:30, we need a comma there, okay? These three errors can be easily corrected in this way. For example, comma, use a comma instead of a semicolon, right? So for example, little introductory bit, because so many of us work 24/7, we are often cranky. So again, how do you fix it? You use a comma, and then you add a independent clause. We are often cranky. The dance having started at 8:30, right? We're waiting for something else. So how do you fix it? You change the form of the verb so that we're not expecting something else. And you just say the dance started at 8:30. Because when I hear the dance having started at 8:30, I am waiting for something. Be careful not to confuse commas and semicolons, okay? When to use this pattern. This is probably, these sections in the book are probably the best, because the best aspect of the book, other than the patterns themselves, because they tell us when to use these. Okay, well, you're writing, do I just throw in compound sentences everywhere on the page? No, you should use them only certain times. And it takes a while to learn that. Use this pattern when you have talked about similar ideas in several sentences. When you combine these ideas, you will have a single, more powerful sentence. When revising, look for paragraphs with many short sentences that have parallel ideas and ask yourself, can I combine these sentences to give my message a more forceful impact? Okay, then they're going to give examples that they've come up with, probably better than my examples. We have here, Gloria, try on these jeans, right? So there's our independent clause, our first independent clause, try on these jeans. And then we have, they seem to be your size. That's a second independent clause. So subject, verb, has a semicolon in between. Some people dream of being something, independent clause, semicolon. Others stay awake and are, right? Now, figures of speech like antithesis are going to be perfect for these types of sentences. Using a semicolon to bring together antithesis, figure of speech is great. Reading is the easy part. Remembering takes more effort. Again, two independent clauses. Then we have some professional examples. He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. So we have a type of antithesis, right? There's parallelism as well. Okay, these are good examples. He who knows himself is enlightened. It wasn't enough simply to create the world. The Aboriginal god Burial wanted it to be beautiful as well. So again, these are longer, right? But it's the same concept. Independent clause. It was not enough simply to create. Okay, in infinitive. So it was not simply to enough. We'll cover infinitives later on. The Aboriginal god Burial wanted, so subject verb, And so we have two independent clauses brought together with a semicolon. So when you make your examples, either do variations of the professional examples or just come up with your own, okay? And that should be it. Then you have some, oh, there's some more. My forefathers didn't come over on the Mayflower, they met the boat. Okay, this is a Native American. So again, my forefathers didn't come. So subject verb, semicolon, they met. Subject verb, right? So two independent clauses. Then it is dark. So that's an independent clause. It is a night when kings in golden suits ride elephants over the mountains. It is a night, right? That is our second independent clause there. It made no sense to anyone. It was just style. Again, joined together with a semicolon. And you can complete these exercises for practice, but what I want you to do is make 5 examples of pattern 1. Okay, and then next video, we'll go to pattern 1A.